Continuing with the next speaker, who acts as policy, technology, entrepreneurship advisor, including for people like Richard Branson's Carbon War Room, UK House of Parliament, European Commission, Tech London advocate, and more. He's also an entrepreneur, composer, and pianist, and fluent in 6 languages. Welcome, Professor Dohler, Head of Center for Telecom Research and Chair Professor of King's College London. Please join us on stage. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
I don't know which language to use.
I'll do it in English today. So.
Thank you so much.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? 100 years ago, it took decades to build a billion-dollar business. Decades. Hundreds of thousands of people, a lot of patience. Now you zoom forward to not even 15 years ago, 2000, the year 2000. Suddenly, it only takes 10 years to do that. And maybe a 10th, if not a 100th of that kind of workforce. You zoom forward another 10 years, 2010, and suddenly it takes 18 people within 18 months to build a billion-dollar business, right? You think of companies like WhatsApp and similar. Now today, what's happening today, you just do the interpolation. So maybe we're going to have billion-dollar companies built by single people. Look at Elon Musk. He's a shared CEO on $2 billion companies. Continue that trend, in 2020, we will have part-time CEOs, people like me who be at university teaching students and run maybe, hopefully, a billion-dollar business on the side. You continue that trend, 2030, what's the next step? The future is that maybe machines will be running companies. So I've seen that in London, we are starting that. There is a company which is composed purely out of algorithms. The CEO is an AI engine, the CTO, CSO, etc. So the machines are taken over. It's a registered company, and they're trying to figure out whether that could actually work out long term. So here you go. It is an acceleration of innovation. Actually, the accelerated innovation is accelerated, and we have what I call an atomization of identity, which will, as we figured out, we had a brilliant speaker from MasterCard before, will change how this globe ticks. So let's zoom in a little bit. I've been now in a few places, and I've been in a large corporation. I worked in France Telecom for a few years in the R&D department, and I've seen a lot of things. And these companies are in a huge dilemma because innovation is accelerating. How do you, the only way for them to stay in the innovation cycle is to do something, new products, etc. How they used to do it, they used to run huge R&D departments. I was one person in that R&D department in France Telecom, and I realized we are just a vitrine. They just have us because they want to show to the world that we're doing R&D. In fact, France Telecom kept the R&D department because the only reason why they kept it was because the New York Stock Exchange would give them tax rebate if they had an R&D department. That's the only reason. No real innovation was brought out to market. So how do they do this? Joint ventures work with some companies. Companies like Deutsche Telekom has been very successful in saying, hey, we cannot keep an in-house R&D department because my human skill set in the company changes too slowly for the market to evolve, so therefore let's spin it out. We have a great idea, let's do 50-50. We put the idea with the cash and bring new human capital into that company and grow. That works pretty well. And of course, the big trend which is coming out of the Silicon Valley, reaching now London and probably going eastwards as we talk, is the story of acquisition, M&As, right? Mergers and acquisitions, a big thing. You hear WhatsApp being acquired for 18 billion, DeepMind for 300 million. You think this is a huge amount of money. Truth is, it's not. They're buying companies who have a product, who have a market, who have an established customer base. It is a de-risked sensation, actually. So they're building into the product portfolio what maybe alone they couldn't have done. So therefore, that M&A is probably going to be the future trend in a few years to come. And that's why large corporations are now out for that. Now, let's move on. I've also built a $100 million startup called Worldsensing. And we found a lot of challenges on the way, really. That's why I wanted to share that a little bit, and also because I've been speaking quite a lot to the startups down in the booth. And That conversation I have with them is the same conversation I have with people in London, in Berlin, in Tel Aviv, in Moscow, in Silicon Valley. It's the same thing, right? So the mindset is the same thing. You have to pass for 3 milestones, really. So any entrepreneur in the room, please listen in. Only 3 milestones, very simple. I only ask you to remember one number, which is number 3, not 4 numbers, which was 57, 22, 4, and 1, if I remember well. So here you go. Three milestones. First milestone is what I call the milestone of no return. It is essentially, you have an idea, you can tinker with that, you can do it privately. At some point you'll realize, wow, that's really difficult to do. And you go your normal way. Your normal way is to have a job at Tesco's or do whatever you want to do. Now, if you have committed publicly to something which you think is a great idea, for you to actually go back is very difficult. I bet that Elon Musk, when he realized how difficult Hyperloop is, really, from a legislation, technology, and other points of view, he would have gone back. But unfortunately, he has made a huge press story out of this, so he couldn't. So now we're in a dilemma. We have to go forward. The only way forward, and that's the only way to go, right? This is how we invented the light bulb. So second milestone is a transition from what I call prototype to product, and that's the most difficult transition today, because to build a prototype today is super simple. Right? Super simple. Between me going with my mates Friday night to the pub and having a brilliant idea, and then come Sunday night using all the open tools available today, Arduino, Raspberry Pi, all the open web platforms, whatever you name it. If I'm reasonably skilled, by Sunday evening I have a prototype up and running which looks just almost like a product. Now, and this is where companies fail, because they think a prototype will scale into the millions. It doesn't, it fail. They burn bridges and things don't work. So because it's so easy, it is the most difficult step to go ahead. You have to have a solid product which works 24/7, rain, snow, millions of customers, etc., etc. And the third milestone, which is probably easy to achieve these days, is this fit from this step from product-driven to market-driven. So I advise a lot of companies in London. If 2-3 years down the road, I still see that the company is composed 80-90% of tech people, I know they will fail. Believe it or not, you really can only survive if you get your paycheck into the bank account, and you only get your paycheck if you're marketing, sales, etc. Sounds very obvious, but for some reason, because most companies are driven out of the tech world, they kind of stick to the tech team and love the technology and never hit the market. The other tips I give is apart from the usual stuff which you will hear from all the accelerators and entrepreneur advisors, I think one of the most obvious thing everybody does wrong is they confuse need and demand, right? So there's clearly a need for the Internet of Things, but there's no demand at the moment. Everybody talks about it. We've been talking about it in my community for 15 years about the Internet of Things. There's always a need for that. Right? It will always a need to make the operational processes in the industrial world more efficient, more effective. All the time. Doesn't mean there's a demand there. Demand comes when somebody puts actually a paycheck on the table. So you need to wait. You need to understand very, very carefully when demand really picks up. Silicon Valley is a big advantage of deep pockets to create demand, right? So we had Facebook before Facebook, YouTube before YouTube, Twitter before Twitter, but there were the deep pockets which could create demand, and that's why it took off. The other thing people always confuse is, and I just asked that question down in the booth, is, do you know the name and the surname of the person who will actually pay for your product? They wouldn't know. Okay, it's just they just love the stuff they're doing. The thing is really useful. But if you don't know the name and the surname of actually the person who's going to pay for the product, likelihood is 5 years down the road you will not find them. You need to know before you start. You need to know really what you're after, and only that works. It's a lot of stuff with the companies, really. It's a very exciting world to be in. I always compare creating a company to jumping off the cliff without actually having the instructions on how to assemble that, right? So that's the sensation. It's a tough thing to be in. Not everybody loves it, but once you do it, it's a really good way to go. Now let me move on, because now I'm at university, and universities are transforming. They're trying to copy a lot of this entrepreneurial world, but they fail. And the biggest shock I had is when I talked to Richard Brunson, and Richard said, Mischa, universities are completely useless. Well, here you go, right? So who of you has taken a university degree? So, don't talk to Richard. He wouldn't talk to, don't tell him, okay? It really made me think, and probably he has a point to prove. Apart from some things we could discuss about, but really from that point of view, like creating skill set innovation, universities are lagging behind. We're still living in the 19th century, normally at best in the 20th century, not 21st century. And it's really astonishing. because universities have a great mindset. People understand the word dead in deadline. Those academics here will understand that. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but they're screwed up all over the place, except the US. And the reason is very simple. They presume that everything starts with an idea. If you've ever created a company, you know that your idea is here, and what your company in the end will be is there. So universities protect that idea area. Patents, IPR, they think IPR is all what matters to build a company. It is not. It's probably the least of it all when it comes to their creation. That's mistake number one. Mistake number two they do is they think because they own the academic, they also own the company. So we see horrific things like a university claiming 50% stake in a company. No investor would invest in something which is owned 50% by something which you don't even know what it is. Who do you talk to? Who is responsible, right? What if the university decides to change policies? So I don't know any investor, except for some really freaky type of IP groups, etc., who deal with that, who would actually invest in these type of companies. So we have some homework to do here in Europe, and I'm advocating that a lot in the UK and in Europe generally. We need to change that framework, and it's very simple. Change two things. Don't focus only on the IP, and forget about owning the whole company. Make it a golden share. Call it a golden share. Take 5% of the company, but they're not dilutive. You can't dilute them until whatever, 100 million, 500 million, billion dollar valuation. It's a fair deal. Everybody feels comfortable with that. Okay, putting it all together, things work typically when we have these innovation clusters. Maybe that's a message also to Bulgaria and to Sofia. It has to be in walking distance. For some reason, it only works then. We love human contact. We love to touch each other, smell each other, see each other into the eye, have a coffee together. It has to be in walking distance, really. Cities like London works really well. Silicon Valley, okay, for the American, walking is like driving, so it's driving distance. But then you have cities like Tel Aviv, you have Berlin, etc. So if in Sofia you have everything within walking or at least short-time driving distance, this could work out. Bring the large corporations with the investors, with the universities, your rebranded universities, with your startups, which I've seen fascinating, a lot of them, and you will get something going. It's very native. You don't have to do anything. It will nurture itself. That's the beauty of that. And what will come out is what I think is the future, really. It is something what I call, or we call actually, Ali Hosseini came up with that word, the 21st century Renaissance atelier. So the Renaissance time was a very interesting time because it has bootstrapped a lot of the really interesting things which humanity is using today. And it happened because in a single piece of real estate in one room, loads of different disciplines came together: biology, chemistry, geography, etc., etc. And out came a lot of really fascinating things which we're still using, defining us as of today. Now, as centuries went on, we went separate ways. We became very specialized. They're electrical engineers, computer scientists, they're artists, they're musicians, they're chemists, etc., mathematicians. But now is a good time to horizontalize that again, to learn to speak the same language. And that's coming along. If you go to a place like Silicon Valley and London, etc., you see rooms like these ones here where actually they do resemble these Renaissance ateliers quite a lot. And I work with Ali Hosseini, he's quite famous New York artist, to now stage a very disruptive tech art show at the Tate Modern in London in September. You're most welcome to attend. Thank you very much for your attention. Cheers.
Thank you for being so much strict on time, Mischa. It's always a pleasure to have such speakers on stage. Thank you so much.
Cheers.